Imagine a band so ahead of their time that even their own label didn't know what to do with them. A band that wrote songs about Godzilla, Lovecraftian horrors, and the existential dread of suburban life, and somehow made it all feel cool. Now imagine that band going completely silent for 10 years. No records, no new material, just gone. That's exactly what happened to Öyster Cult. And then, in 1998, quietly, without much fanfare, they came back. Not with a reunion cash grab or a nostalgia tour record. They came back with something genuinely surprising, something dark, precise, and alive. They came back with Heaven Forbid, and if you never heard it, you're about to understand why some fans consider it one of the most underrated hard rock albums of the entire decade. To understand why Heaven Forbid matters, you have to understand what preceded it. By 1988, Öyster Cult had released Imaginos, a sprawling labyrinth concept album that had been in development for nearly 2 decades. It was ambitious to the point of being almost impenetrable, a cosmic horror story told through layers of guitar and mythology. Critics didn't quite know what to make of it, audiences largely moved on, and then the band went quiet. 10 years, a whole decade of silence on the studio front. The music industry shifted dramatically around them. Grunge exploded and faded, alternative rock reshaped radio, heavy metal splintered into a dozen subgenres. The world that Öyster Cult had helped create had moved on without them. So when they finally returned with new original material, the question wasn't just, is this any good? The question was, is there still a place for this band in 1998? The answer, it turns out, was yes, but the story of how they got there is fascinating. Heaven Forbid was recorded at Millbrook Sound Studios in New York, far away from the glittering excess of Los Angeles or the corporate machinery of major label studios. The production team was lean and focused, primarily Buck Dharma, whose real name is Donald Rolser, and Eric Bloom, the band's longtime co-frontman. They brought in Steve Schenk as a third production voice. The goal was clear from the start: modernize the sound without betraying it. They wanted to move away from the dense, concept-heavy architecture of Imaginos and return to what made the band great in the first place: intricate arrangements, spine-tingling guitar solos, and that distinctive atmospheric dread that had always set them apart from straightforward metal acts. The lineup that assembled for the session was a combination of classic chord trio and a new hungry rhythm section. Alongside Bloom and Buck Dharma, the album featured Alan Lanier on guitars, keyboards, and his signature bluesy Hammond organ. Holding down the low end were 2 bassists, Danny Miranda, who would later tour with Queen's live band, and John Rogers, who appeared on 3 tracks. The drumming duties were split between Chuck Burgee, a former Rainbow drummer who anchored most of the record, and Bobby Rondinelli, another former Rainbow and Black Sabbath stickman who appeared on 1 key track. What this lineup produced was something tighter and more direct than anything they'd done in years. The production had been described as monumental and crystal clear, a big, serious-sounding rock record that didn't apologize for being unfashionable in the age of nu metal. Here's where Heaven Forbid gets truly interesting, because the album's most distinctive, creative element wasn't a guitarist or a producer, it was a novelist. John Shirley, a Bram Stoker Award-winning author known for his work in science fiction and horror, co-wrote 8 of the album's 10 new studio tracks. Shirley had been a longtime fan of the band, and his involvement gave the album a literary backbone that most rock records simply don't have. Think about what that means in practice. You're not getting throwaway love song lyrics or generic hard rock posturing. You're getting fully realized narratives, dark psychological studies, and science fiction concepts filtered through the voice of someone who writes that material for a living. The opening track, See You in Black, is a perfect example. It's not a love song, it's a story about convincing a woman to murder her abusive husband. It hits with the force of a short story told at maximum volume. Eyes in the 50s, Raymond Land, there's the sky. X-Ray Eyes draws directly from the 1963 Roger Corman film, The Man with the X-Ray Eyes, starring Ray Milland. The lyrical premise explores what it would really feel like to see beyond the limits of human perception, not as a superpower, but as a curse. The more you see, the worse it gets. This is one of my favorites. It's actually a very catchy song. Live For Me tells the story of two brothers connected by a psychic bond. One is killed by a drunk driver. The survivor is then haunted, or perhaps guided, by his brother's spirit, urged to live a full life of both of them. It's genuinely moving material. Power Underneath Despair is a revenge narrative. A man betrayed by gangsters, sent to prison for crimes he didn't commit, and eventually rising to reckon with those who wronged him. It's the kind of cinematic storytelling that most bands can only gesture toward. Shirley's contributions gave the album a cohesion and a sense of purpose that elevates it well above the typical comeback record. This wasn't a band going through the motions, it was a band with something to say. No Blue Öyster Cult story is complete without at least a little weirdness, and heaven forbid delivers on that front too. The album's original working title was Ezekiel's Wheel, a reference to a biblical passage in Ezekiel that many UFO enthusiasts and ancient astronaut theorists interpret as a description of an alien spacecraft, very on brand. Then there's the artwork. The original cover was widely criticized, even by fans who love the music. Words like Cheap Jack and awful appeared in reviews. It was generic horror movie imagery that didn't do justice to what was inside. An alternate cover was created featuring a woman inspired by actress Morgan Fairchild, which ended up on the reverse of the album insert. It remains one of those classic cases where the packaging genuinely undersells the project. So what should you actually listen to first? Start with See You in Black. It's the lead single for a reason, a frantic, aggressive hard rocker with bass and drums intro that punches you in the chest before the guitars even arrive. Some fans even consider it the most purely metal thing the band has ever recorded. Then there's Still Burnin', which functions as a thematic sequel to their beloved 1981 hit, Burnin' For You. If you grew up on that song, hearing this one is like running into an old friend who've aged remarkably well. The album closes with In Thee. A live semi-acoustic recording of a song originally from their 1979 album, Mirrors. It's a quiet, almost tender ending that showcases Alan Lanier's bluesy instincts and leaves you with something reflective rather than bombastic. And then there's Harvest Moon. If you only take one recommendation away from this video, let it be this song. Written solely by Buck Dharma, it's widely considered the creative peak of the entire album. A spooky, slow-burning melodic rock ballad that feels like it was lifted directly from the pages of a Stephen King novel. That's not an accident. Buck Dharma has spoken about being inspired by the way King describes the atmospheric rot of places like Derry or the Overlook Hotel. That specific, suffocating sense of a location itself is evil. Harvest Moon does the same thing in song form. It's set in a crumbling rural farming town, partly inspired by Ithaca, New York, where residents disappear every year when the harvest season arrives. The evil is cyclical, it returns, it always returns. It is by any measure a classic Blue Öyster Cult track, one of the few from the album that remain a permanent fixture in their live set list. If the song had appeared on Secret Treaties or Agents of Fortune, nobody would bat an eye. It belongs in the same conversation. Heaven Forbid peaked number 29 on the UK Independent Albums chart. Modest commercial performance, but respectable for a rock back returning after a decade away. For years, it was nearly impossible to find on streaming platforms due to licensing disputes with the original CMC International label. It wasn't until 2020 when Frontiers Music reissued a remastered version produced by Alessandro Del Vecchio, and it became widely, easily accessible to new listeners. Also, you can find it on YouTube, which is where I was able to listen to it. But if you're into collecting, that reissue matters because it's easier to find. Because this album deserves to be heard. It's not a perfect record. Critics noted fairly that it lacks some of the creative spark that the original lineup's Bouchard brothers brought to the band's classic records. But what it offers is something rarer than perfection. It offers sincerity. A band refusing to be irrelevant. A band that came back not to coast on nostalgia, but to prove they still had something worth saying. They did it, and they absolutely did it well. If you're new to Blue Öyster Cult, start with the classics and then work your way here. If you already love the band and somehow, heaven forbid, has slipped past you, fix that today. Put on Harvest Moon in the dark and tell me you're not impressed. Check out this playlist of other Blue Öyster Cult reviews, which should be appearing on your screen right now. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Please like this video. It helps me with the YouTube algorithm. Please subscribe if you're not already. I do rock and metal reviews, rankings, and more. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one.